The chair recognizes the honourable member, Mr. Thomas Christopher Famous.
Good afternoon, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Good afternoon, colleagues, and good afternoon, Bermuda. I'm going to carry on in the vein slightly from MP Weeks and MP, not Sylvan, but Sylvan Richards. I'm not going to talk about homelessness. I'm talking about young black men who need opportunities. Because if they don't get the opportunities, there's the same ones who become not so young black men who are homeless. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the last time we was in the House and I got a chance to speak, I spoke about a young man in my constituency who came to visit me while we were in Parliament looking for employment. It pained me that as his MP, I couldn't give him a job. So, a few weeks later, I was given the opportunity to introduce this young man to the Premier. I didn't speak, I just said, this is the Premier, this is Mr. So-and-so. The young man articulated that he had several skill sets, including welding. He spoke 3 different languages: English, Flemish, French, and Dutch. Well, Flemish and Dutch is similar, for those who don't know. So 4 languages. And I just introduced them, and I just said, okay, now you two talk. An hour later, the young man came out and says, the Premier has set up an appointment with me and the Department of Workforce Development for next week. So said, so done. We kept in contact. He comes over, helps me out, do stuff around the community. A week later, he says to me, he has an interview with Mr. Tolbert from Club Red, Harris's Bay. Not Greg, the Jabril. Perfect pass welding. He also had an appointment at the Workforce Development. So again, keep following up. Last week, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that young man was offered a full-time apprenticeship, partially sponsored by the government. This is a young man who's 19 years old, never been in trouble, most likely will never be in trouble. Very humble. Yesterday, I drove through Devil's Hill, Harris's Bay, and I said, let me stop. And I saw the young man, I saw a guest worker, and I saw Mr. Greg Tolbert. So I went to Mr. Tolbert and I said, Mr. Tolbert, I want to thank you for giving this young man a chance. You know what he said to me? He says, Famous, no, thank you guys, the government, for making sure young men are learning a trade. Because in his 50 years of doing that, he's seen the number of young black men getting into trades go down. Now, we could talk about the TAC, why it was closed. We could talk about Robert Crawford, why it was closed. We could talk about that forever. But we're going to stop talking and start doing. So I challenge the Premier and all of us in this room that we know young black men, young black women that have skills, or even if they don't have the skills, they have the attitude to want to go ahead. You take some time. You take them yourself and go to the Workforce Development. Don't just say, go see this person at Workforce Development. They might be intimidated. You, as their MP, whether you're the MP or not, take 5, 10, 15, 20, an hour out of your time and take that, and you make the appointment, and you take that person there. You follow up. If they got a job, go there and make sure they're making their time. Because at the end of the day, we have companies in this country that they hire a Bermudian, black Bermudian, 6 months later, oh, they didn't quite work out. That was just a ploy to say we gave them a chance. I have running battles with some of my colleagues about this issue. Lack of skills, meeting lack of opportunities. This government, no matter what the opposition say, we feel it. Know why? Every price raise that goes up in this country, we aren't immune from those price raises. Every time somebody black loses a job, that's most likely going to affect somebody in our family. We feel it. So I don't want to hear from the opposition, or some members of the opposition, let me be clear, about this government's not doing nothing. This government's tanking the economy. Let me go on, Mr. Speaker. Again, I want to thank the Premier, and I want to thank not just the Minister of Workforce Development, but the Minister of Education who put things in train. Most importantly, I want to thank the people at the Workforce Development for putting this in train. But let me move on, Mr. Speaker, because sometimes I feel like we're operating a Game of Thrones or something. Sometimes. Mr. Speaker, just this morning I got a WhatsApp. I'm late, but I'm a stock. Mr. Speaker, just this morning I got a WhatsApp from a gentleman. He says, brother, I'm considering leaving the island. So I said, why? I can't make it here with continuing expenses. Every time I look, the expenses are going up. Every time. Again, let me repeat for the people of Bermuda. Not one MP, not one minister is immune from the rise in costs. It's not like we go into marketplace and they say, oh, Scott, you get 10% off because you're an MP. No, we got affected by it. Our families got affected by it. My daddy religiously goes to marketplace, Linda's, and Arnold's every Wednesday. And every Wednesday he comes in shaking his head. I don't know what you boys are doing, Chris, because the prices keep going up. He could tell me a price going up 10 cents. And every week something's going up. But you know what, Mr. Speaker? Let's go on to reducing taxes. This government has reduced duty on staple items. Vegetables, some sodas, and other items. Yet when we go in marketplace, those prices have gone up. But do we hear anything from certain people in the OBA? No. Mr. Speaker, last week I wrote a piece about the price of mobile data. Everybody in here uses cell phone. Yeah. Half the island, more than half uses cell phone. Do you know, Mr. Speaker, that Bermuda is the third most expensive place to have data? On the planet. We spend almost 4 times what the lowest price is in the Caribbean. Why is our data prices higher? Yet when we put things in place to lower these, we hear chirps, oh, the government's not doing anything. I understand why people are frustrated, because prices are going up. But every time we try to do something to lower prices, what happens? The greedy, I'm going to repeat, the greedy merchants and service providers in this country just continue to raise their prices. Mortgage rates going up. So what happens? A landlord's got to raise the rent. And then what's going to happen? People are going to say, oh, my rent's going up. I'm going to move to a smaller place. Somehow it becomes the government's fault. Mr. Speaker, let me touch on something. We are undergoing things to call healthcare reform. Last couple months ago, a certain company declared $20 million profit, net profit. What do we see a couple weeks later? Yes. Oh, premiums are going up. Yes. Not just little 5%, not little 10%, exponentially. That's not the right word, but it's going up. And again, what do? They send out a letter and say, it's the government's fault. But we hear nothing from certain people in the OBA. Now, I understand there are some of those who care about Bermudians, but why aren't the same efforts about arbitrate put on what is BF&M doing? Why aren't they raising their voice about that?
Not a word about that. Not a word about that. Sure, all the better tax charges. What about that? What about the banks?
Now, I'm going to say this. There's a certain member in here who has declared that they have interest in insurance companies. I aren't calling no names.
Protect the guilty. Protect the guilty.
My point, Mr. Speaker, if you care about Bermudians, if you are a shareholder, speak up. Don't make it look like it's just the PLP fighting against Bermudians. You're sitting there being silent, collectively, while we're here fighting to lower things for Bermudians.
They won't do that. Keep their shares intact.
Keep the dividends coming.
Yeah. Yeah.
Keep the dividends coming.
Yes. Let's keep it open. Put another word.
Mr. Speaker, my point is this.
Protectors, dividends is right.
No. We need to open up new insurance companies.
Anybody want to point on me so I can sit down? Mr. Speaker, may I continue? Here's the thing, Mr. Speaker. Every day, last week I spoke about social media. Social media is a gauge of how the people are feeling. The people are vexed right now. Rightfully. This price going up, that price going up. But what's the quick thing they want to say? Oh, it's the government. Oh, it's tax. Who is taxing the banks for them to raise some mortgage rates? I'm going to suffer as a landlord because I ain't going to raise my tax. I ain't going to raise my rent on my tenants. But my mortgage rate's going up. Not because government. I'm going to suffer because I'm going to subsidize somebody's health insurance. You see, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to revert back to this young man. Like you, Mr. Speaker, I like to go out in my constituency. And my people talk to me. Sometimes harshly. But the point I'm saying, Mr. Speaker, is as a government, we were elected 17 months ago because we were to put Bermudians first. And in that effort to put Bermudians first, at times the message gets lost when people see rising prices. And they think, well, maybe they ain't putting us first. We have to do a better job at communicating how we are doing this. I'm going to take personal responsibility. I'm part of that to help communicate that. But each one in the House has to do it as well. There's no minister in here that can get all the message out by themselves. Whether you're opposition or not, if you know it's a good policy we're doing, speak to it. Mr. Speaker, let me finish up here. On Game of Thrones, they were saying, winter's coming. Winter's coming. No, but it's relevant at the moment. In Bermuda, the saying is price increases are coming. Price increases are coming. So I'm saying this to every minister in here. Continue to educate the people about what we are trying to do to lower the prices for Bermudians. Don't get sidetracked by some people, because they aren't the ones speaking up about these price increases for some reason. So, Mr. Speaker, I say this to the people of Bermuda. Continue to hold our feet to the fire. Continue to demand that prices go down. Yeah, all right. But the reality is, as long as greedy merchants continue unabated, prices are going to go up. As long, I'm going to repeat it, as long as greed is considered good in this country, prices. It's not capitalism. It's something else. I don't want to say what the word is. It's greed. Unadulterated greed. When you could tell me that in an island called St. Kitts, I could spend $4 for a gigabyte, and here in Bermuda, I'm going to spend $12 for that same gigabyte. What is it? They're not paying import duty on data. It's not there no more. Mr. Speaker, let me conclude here. In 2012, we had 35,443 people employed, jobs. 2017, we had 33,653. Again, do the numbers. The same people that's complaining about us lost jobs. But the people don't want to hear that, Mr. Speaker. They don't. So I implore all of us not to bicker about this and that and the other. Let's continue to educate the people about what's really happening in this country. Because the war is not political. We will win the next election. I could guarantee you that. But we will lose if the unadulterated greed in this country is allowed to continue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.